Welcome. In this video I'm going to show you how to both fussy cut any shape using regular templates and how to just cut any shape. So a few things are kind of a shape 101. I'm going to take you back to geometry class with this fun little ruler. And it's a protractor. You might not have seen it since you were in high school or junior high, but this is really your friend. If you have a plastic one, you can print these online as well. But if you think of shapes as being the same size, regardless of whether they are 4 inches or 2 inches, this works for any shape except for a circle, because all of the angles are always going to be the same size. So let me prove it to you. I'm going to take just a simple hexagon, and this one has already been cut, and you can see that it is this here, it fits this size. Now if I take it over to this larger hexagon, you can see that the angle is identical. So keep this in the back of your head that all shapes except for a circle are going to be the same size. So you can also apply that to triangles. If you think an equilateral triangle, so that means it has 3 equal sides, is going to be 1/6 of a hexagon. Then if this is the same size, same length, this is going to be the same length, and this is going to be the center point, okay? So then if you have 2 equilateral triangles put together right here, these two here, then this angle becomes the same. And the cool thing is that you can use a protractor and line it up here. Let's see, let's find the easiest way. We're going to use this dot, or this corner right here, as our dot. And a hexagon will always be 120 degrees. So you can see right here. Let's see if I can zoom this in really quick. 120 degrees is the angle. So that's the same thing here and the same thing here. It's still 120 degrees. So that means that any hexagon, regardless of it being this size or this size, is always going to be the same. So then the next thing that I do is I take a look at a shape and I break it up into a square, because you can build any shape out of a square. So this is just a simple, I think it's a 4.5 by 8.5 inch ruler. I do have a love-hate relationship with it. There are a lot of things that I really like about it. I love the 45-degree line. That is absolutely huge. There's also a 60-degree angle. We have another 45 here, and I'll talk about my tape in just a little bit. I hate this right here. It really messes up quite a bit, because then that means that only half of it is usable. So I wonder if I could, well, that's another video for another time. But anyway, so I think about shapes in terms of a square. Can I break this into a square to make it easier to cut? So what I do is I will lay my ruler on top, and yes, sure enough, these two sides are parallel. These are perpendicular, means that they run in together. So parallel, that means that I can use these two as a registration mark, so to speak, and then this is my center. So everywhere on a square you can use any of these points where a 45-degree intersects, and that can be your center. And what I really like about these is then it makes it really simple. Okay, so in this little block right here, sorry, this gets to be a little bit much. In this block right here, this area is the center. So then theoretically, let's use this as an example because we have a nice center. I can use these as my sides and line it up. So what I'm going to do in this case is see that I have I look for where it intersects, because that makes it really, really simple. And on this ruler, which there you can see, this is the center where the white and the black intersect. So then I would take this and I would line this up on this side, and then I would take my pen. I don't want to use a friction pen on my paper. Here we go. I'd take my pen, let's pretend this is a piece of fabric, and I would mark. You can also cut, but I want to be able to see what I have. Oh yes, there is the center, I'm good. So then here's one of my other tips. I ask my readers, what is one of your biggest concerns about fussy cutting? And one person said that she can never get a 1/4 inch seam allowance without a fancy ruler. Well, there aren't any 1/4 inch police. So I would rather have overage, especially if I'm fussy cutting. Because let's say that I didn't give myself enough room here. I want to be able to have enough space to be able to move it a little bit more. So in this instance, if I wasn't entirely sure that this was exactly how I wanted it, I would have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then what I do is when I lay my piece down, and I do use a light box, I have a blog post about how I use my phone as a light box to make sure that I get exactly the fussy cut that I want. In fact, this is the block that I use that technique, and I am so truthful that I do not use specialty rulers. I don't own specialty rulers. The only ones that I have are, I have some squares, I do have some hexagons, but I don't use them. So all of these were cut using this technique. So anyway, I would rather have a little bit of extra so that I can move it to either side, and I'll just put a little bit of glue on the back side, hold it down exactly where I want it, and then if I see, oh, I have more over on this side than I do on this side, that's okay, I'll just cut it off at that point. Or, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't matter. These ones all look pretty good, but sometimes I do have some blocks that have more on one side and less on the other. So this is kind of step one, is taking a look at a shape and seeing if it can be broken into a square. You can do this with a circle, and then just cut your circle shape, glue it down, and then just trim around the edges just loosely, and use my light box technique to make sure that you have it in the center, and then just, glue it down as you normally would. For circles, I would absolutely glue based. It just makes the corners much, much nicer. Okay, sorry, talking a lot, and I need some tea. So far, what we have discussed is that all shapes are the same size, regardless of them being, I think this is a 2 inch, this might be a 2.5 inch. Come on, protractor. I can't lift this off of my table. So I don't know that I showed you on this one. It's the same thing, that here again we have 120 degrees. So if you don't have a protractor, I encourage you to get one. I would not cut with this. I would trace. I would use this as tracing. I have these as a free downloadable, a free printable on my blog. This is the Hexagon Templates and Friends, and there are lots of different shapes that play really, really well with the hexagon, so then you can make more than just flowers. So anyway, I hope that's helpful there. Let's move on and let's talk about some real applications of how I actually use these. So for the sake of demonstration, what I am going to do is show you just on a piece of fabric. I'm using a friction pen so that I can go back over it and I can erase my lines so that I'm not keeping them. So this is just for demonstration purposes, but it is exactly how I do this step by step. So the first thing that I do is I use painter's tape. I had used Sharpie, but this was a tip from another quilter to use painter's tape, and I actually really like it. Let me move this for just a minute so there's not too much going on. It makes it nice to be able to remove a template. If you use Sharpie, Sharpie is removable. Let's see what color this is. Oh, it's just a silver. So Sharpie is removable. You can't really see it on here since it's a silver, with rubbing alcohol. So if you have it on any template, make sure that if you have little grippies that you don't use it on the grippy side. It has to be on the top side so that you can wash it off. Just take a cotton ball and a little bit of rubbing alcohol and it removes it right away, so your templates are not ruined. I've done this on expensive templates. I actually have some marked for on a larger template that the block needs to be a certain size, and then I cut the batting for a quilt as you go, and so I just have that marked with Sharpie, and I use a different color than what is on the template. So I don't use black, I use something, usually a hot pink or something, so then I can see what it is, and sometimes I'll put a post-it note on there for what I'm working on. Anyway, so what I do is I take my paper piece, and this has, it's from my Christmas Star EPP. That's English paper piecing. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So what I do is I cut out my paper template and I put it on top. And I keep these, these are at 3/8. So remember I said there are no 1/4 inch police. I don't use a 1/4 inch because I want to have that extra room to be able to move things as they need to be moved. So I have on these two edges, I try to keep these here so I know that it's 3/8 of an inch here. All of these are cut to 3/8 of an inch. I use my rotary cutter and I just mark 3/8 of an inch and I cut my painter's tape. Then what I do is I lay down the tape where the paper piece needs to go. And it's really important to make sure that if you're using a 90-degree template that you do have the 45-degree in the center. So if you think back to your high school geometry class, 45 degrees is half of 90 degrees. So geometry really becomes the quilter's friend, again, because all of the shapes become the same size. So this is going to have the same angles regardless of it being this size or anything. The shapes are all the same. They're all the same angles. And again, you can use a protractor to do that. So then the next step is let's use this shape, and I will show you exactly how I do that. So let's say that we want this cute little bunny. What I do is I move this around and I really eyeball it. Sometimes I will measure exactly how much. Oh, I need to move this little bunny. We'll do this one so it's not you're not getting the glare. So I take a look at everything that I have going on here. So sometimes designs may not be perfectly symmetrical. So then you have to make a decision, just like you would with an acrylic template. How do I want things to be laid out? Do I want this to be perfectly symmetrical here? What is the whole shape going to be? So then you take a look at your pattern and you make a decision. Yes, this needs to be exactly in the center. So I'll do two things at this point. I'm going to walk around on the other side of my camera because I'm a lefty, and this just makes it a little bit simpler for me. So if this was my rotary cutter, what I would do is I would make a registration mark here on the end of the 3/8. Because remember, this is where our paper piece is, and we've laid it down and we've put our tape exactly where it needs to go. And I take this, and I take this, and then I make a registration mark right there as well. So I have my 90 degrees. Now, here's the thing, is that because you are using the same piece over and over and over, if you have 3/8 of an inch, you know that everything else is going to be lined up perfectly. So then at this point, what I'll do is I will trace around this, because we are going to need this to lay down our fussy cut when we're putting this on our light box. Okay, so here's our piece. It fits pretty perfectly. We have our registrations, you can't really see it here, our registrations drawn onto the pattern. Now what I do is I take and I eyeball. This is about 3/8 of an inch. If you wanted, what you could do is take this and mark exactly where 3/8 of an inch is. Then what I do is I rotary cut around the entire piece. Again, we're pretending that my pen is the rotary cutter. Now, here's where it becomes really helpful, is if we can eyeball this at 3/8 of an inch, or exactly at 3/8 of an inch, but remember we have that fudge room. This registration mark here will line up with this one right here. And if you recall that this becomes relatively an equal, not an equilateral triangle, but it becomes a triangle with a 90 degree, so that I know that this point and this point need to intersect, and the same thing with these right here. So then I would repeat cutting that shape out over and over and over. But let's say that we have something that's a little bit more tricky. Let's say that we have a diamond shape. Diamonds get to be a little bit more difficult because they come in different degrees. Generally, the degrees that you will have for diamond shapes are 60 degrees and 72 degrees. They nestle really, really nicely with squares and hexagons and pentagons. So those are the two that are used more. These can be some of the more tricky shapes. I would say that diamonds are more tricky than circles, because circles are essentially just a square with the corners that have been rounded. The same with a pentagon, hexagon, and octagon. You can think of those in terms of squares. Diamonds get to be a little bit more tricky. So we have our 45 that goes from corner to corner here, and we have our 60 degree, which means that this area right here is 60 degrees. And what you can do, if you get a little bit confused, because it's so easy sometimes, is this between here and here is 60 degrees. So line up your protractor with the edge and the corner, and then we can see, oh yes, this is 60 degrees right here. You can't see it, but it is right on 60 degrees. So I've used this corner hole in the protractor. I've lined it up with the corner on my ruler to see, yes, this is 60 degrees. Now, half of 60 is not 45, so we want to pretend that this line does not exist, and this is where it can get to be a little bit confusing. It's 30. So from this line to this side is half. And you can use this to your advantage. What you would do is, if you have a 60 degree diamond, which would be in it's half of a hexagon, right? So we have it here. I'm using this as the inside of my template. Where did my little pieces go? Here we go. I have marked all over them. Let's remove this for just a second so you can take a look and see. And we'll use this piece here as our example. And we're going to line up first. What we're going to do is we're going to remove this so you can see that this is indeed a 60-degree triangle. And you have to pay careful attention to where the registration marks go to. And you can see that this and this is on 60 degrees. So here's what I would do, because this is not going to be the same if you tape over this corner. What I would do is I would put my paper template down and I would repeat the process as I have before. So you have your paper template on your square, knowing where your degrees are. So we're going to take our 60 degree and we are going, this is the other way that I have done this, and it again works really, really, really well. So we're going to cut this bird into a 60 degree. So I'm going to take a look over here and I'm going to see, where do I want this? Now, one thing that I might do, because this is a straight edge, this would be your halfway, and we have the 30 degree running right here. Let's see, how can I'm going to mark the side of this here so you can see this. Just know that this is my center and this is my 30, or my half of my 60 rather, and I need to give myself plenty of seam allowance. And remember, it's going to be the same regardless of it being small or large. It just increases in shape or in size. And I'm going to say that this is about half. So I'd mark this. And I do really like these friction pens because once you apply some steam, it lifts it right off. Okay, so how do you get your next line, right? Well, that's really simple. All you do, and this is not going to be your cut line. In this example, this is not your cut line. This is your registration line. Okay, so we have that side. Then what you can do is flip your template over, because effectively, even though they are different angles, if you flip it over, it becomes the opposite, right? Then you can do the same thing for this side. We just continue to work around this. We are pretending that we have a paper piece, and you just continue to work around. And I need to flip it this way. And there you have your diamond with this lovely sparrow in the outside, or in the inside. Then what I would do is, if you were beholden to having a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you could cut